Welcome to another episode of Growth Hacker TV. I'm Bronson Taylor, and today I have Chris Herndon with us. Chris, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a really fun conversation. You are the co-founder of Apartment List. So tell us first, what is Apartment List?
That's a great question, Bronson. So through a combination of technology and world-class, design and user experience, what we're trying to do is reinvent what is an extremely broken rental marketplace in the U.S. And that starts by compiling a comprehensive selection of rental listings, but it continues into providing a really user-friendly interface across both web and mobile.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned design a minute ago, and we'll get to that later because it is a beautifully designed product. What is your role at Apartment List? Because co-founder kind of means you do everything. So is there anything specifically you do there more than other things?
I think everything sums it up. My official title is president and co-founder, but I do wear a lot of hats. Traditionally did a lot of business development. A lot of our initial kind of data and revenue partnerships were core to us getting a lot of supply on the site, but also kind of bootstrapping the business and making sure that we can keep the lights on. And then these days I spend a lot more of my time on product. I've been the de facto kind of head of product for the last couple of years. Fortunate to bring in a lot of really talented product managers as of late that are making my job a lot easier, making it look good. But yeah, just figuring out, what are we going to be when we grow up, weighing trade-offs between kind of near-term revenue, kind of building out some of our long-term product ambitions, and making sure, the engineering team is bought in, they understand where we're headed, and everyone's rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, no, it's great to have a co-founder on who's a product guy because that's really the heart of so much of what we talk about here is the product. Now let's talk about the growth of Apartment List a little bit. You helped grow the site, and this is what I read online. You can tell me if it's off a little bit, but you helped grow the site to 1.2 million monthly users in under 15 months, making it the fastest growing apartment search engine ever. Is that right?
Yep, that's right. I can't take much of the credit at all. We have a great team over here, particularly on the user acquisition side, and our partners. We owe a lot of credit. So oftentimes, our data partnerships are our revenue partnerships, and that's really important because we have a monetization strategy, because we have a business model that enables us to tap into paid user acquisition channels. And that can be search engine marketing, it can be display advertising, and that's really important to us. Startups don't often have a business model. They focus on product first and business model second, and then they're not able to kind of access some of the paid user acquisition channels. So that's really important for us.
Yeah, so you actually have money coming in, so you can pay money in advertising to get more money to come in, right?
That's the idea. The virtual.
Well, I want you to break that down for us a little bit, because to get to 1.2 million monthly users, you start at zero. I mean, we all start at zero. Walk us through kind of the phases. You're at zero and you're trying to get 1,000. You're at 1,000, you're trying to get 10,000. You're at 10,000, you're trying to get 100,000. What were kind of the distinct phases that you can say, yeah, that was a unique phase, and then we went into this phase? And talk us through how you actually grew the user base, how you actually acquired customers in those different phases, because it's in the details that we really learn a lot,
Yeah, absolutely. So out of the gates, PR and word of mouth were a nice boost. We were, in the TechCrunch, in Pando Daily, like every startup gets, and fortunately for us, unfortunately for people that live in the Bay Area, New York, other supply constrained markets like that, finding an apartment is a huge problem. It's something that people talk about a lot. So a lot of what we're trying to do really resonated with users. So we got some good users out of the gates that way. That being said, apartment search is something that you do, if you're lucky, only every 2 or 3 years. So getting in front of that customer when they're ready to search for an apartment is a challenge, and that's where search has really come in for us. So for search, we're really active not only in the natural organic search, but also in the paid sponsored stuff. So when somebody's saying, they're looking for a 2-bedroom apartment in San Diego, that they're looking for an apartment. and Apartment List is going to be a great way to get in front of them.
Yeah.
So we, invest heavily into SEO. We have a well-written, informative, clever apartment hunting guide for every city in America, which is helpful, and the search engines like that a lot. And obviously, because we have a comprehensive selection of apartments, our user engagement metrics are really high, and it sends a really strong signal to the search engines that we're a great page to rank. So we get a lot of natural search that way. On the paid side, I mentioned this earlier, we do have a business model which helps a lot. Because our data partnerships very often pay us every time we connect a renter with one of their landlord clients, and that enables us to pay 30 or 40 cents to get a user to come to the website if we can turn that into 50 or 60 cents over the lifetime value of that user.
Yeah, let me ask you a few follow-up questions about those tactics you just kind of laid out. You mentioned the guides, and I think it's a great idea. A city guide for the different cities, how to find an apartment. Was that something you did initially right out of the gates? Like, let's write these guides. And then also, how'd you write them? Is it you writing them? Did you hire somebody, a VA to do it? Walk us through that process, because I think it's a great idea.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. It's a great question. One of our advisors, his name's Dennis Gross. He's a bit of an enigma in the Silicon Valley, but is one of the smartest SEOs in the world, and he helped us, formulate our SEO strategy. So while we were developing ApartmentList.com, this was starting in early 2011, before the launch in September 2011, we knew that we wanted this awesome content on the website. So we started to write these in advance of our formal launch.
Oh, wow.
And, I wrote a handful of the first ones, so did our head of content at the time. And over time, to scale it to the 1,000 largest cities in the U.S., we did need to tap into a freelance, network of writers. So we recruited them over Craigslist, developed kind of a style guide, a tone, a language that we like to use, a voice, and people would adopt that voice, and we were able to scale it out to 1,000 city guides. It was really cool.
Yeah,
and
it's
it's happened out over kind of a 6 to 9 month time frame.
Yeah. I like how much strategy there is there. SEO is not just hope. There's actually a plan there of we're going to have these city guides, and here's the 1,000 cities, it's the goal, and initially it's the co-founder, but eventually it's, people on Craigslist. But there's really a plan there, and sometimes SEO gets grouped into the it's not a plan category when it really can be, so I like that a lot. You also mentioned, buying ads on the search engines. What have you learned about that? Because I know when you first start doing it, things change drastically the more money you spend and the more you learn. What's really worked for you guys there? What are some tips and tricks about, look, don't do this, do this? What have you found out there?
Well, I've heard it's an extremely analytical exercise. So one, mistake that we made early on is we were looking to hire people that do SEM for a living. And, sometimes those can be the best people and they're really good at it. But very oftentimes, you just want to hire the smartest person that you can find. It's an extremely kind of analytically rigorous exercise. So what we did is we learned it ourselves, self-taught. Read SEM for Dummies. Just got in there and started creating some campaigns. There's nothing like just doing it yourself. But then for time, when it came time to hand over the reins and scale things out, we look to hire just pure athletes. So we have former investment bankers, former management consultants, really intelligent folks that just work really hard, that we teach SEM. And we found kind of over within like 4 weeks, they're pretty good at it. And within 2 or 3 months, they're really good at it. They're already much better than us at it. So that's been one way that we've scaled out things. I'd say that with SEM, it's different in every category. So one thing that you need to do is sorry, Bronson, I got somebody waving me down here. I'm going to wave them away.
There you go.
Yeah, no, so SEM is just one thing. You got to prove it out through ROI. So if you don't have those pixels on your website kind of proving out that that user that came to your site did what you wanted them to do to convert, you might as well be flushing money down the toilet. So you need to make sure that you've got your analytics set up right, your pixels are firing off, and it's not a faith-based initiative.
Uh-huh.
It's measurable, and that's one of the exciting things about it.
Now let me make sure I'm clear here. You didn't hire people who were SEM first, data second. You hired people eventually who were data first, who could learn SEM. Did I hear that right?
So if you heard me correctly, we hired someone that was SEM first, analytical second, and it was a nightmare.
Okay.
We had to part ways, and once we had learned our lesson, yeah, we ended up hiring just really smart people
Yeah.
that couldn't spell SEM,
Uh-huh.
but we knew they were really intelligent, and we drilled down on their analytical capabilities,
Mm-hmm.
and then haven't made a mistake hiring that department. In that sense.
Yeah, that's so unique. I've never heard somebody actually go that route. So that's awesome to hear. And I'm also
Yep.
seeing a trend emerge here with the guides. You write them first, and you figure out the style guide and what works, and then you hand over the reins. With SEM, you say, "Look, we didn't know it. We bought SEM for Dummies. We figured it out. Then we handed over the reins." It seems like that's an approach you take with a lot of things in your business: is do it yourself first, learn it, and then hand it over, because you can actually lead in that case and not just be, following somebody who claims to know what they're doing. Is that kind of how you approach a lot of things in your business?
That's exactly right. I'm kind of a first-time entrepreneur and new to this whole management thing. And I'm not going to tie another hand behind my back by not knowing what the hell I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Having done something first is really critical to kind of managing and mentoring someone else to do it. And you never know if you're doing something right until you do it yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a great philosophy. Whatever you're doing in your business, you have to do it yourself, or you can't actually lead intelligently. You can sound intelligent, but it's not really intelligent. So we talked about a couple things that did work. We talked about SEM, we talked about SEO, and those seem to be kind of the evergreen, ongoing strategies for you guys. What did you try to acquire users that didn't work? What are some of the dead ends you went down for a month, 6 months, whatever, and then you said, "Look, this isn't working. Let's just go back to SEM and SEO." Anything like that?
One thing that I was personally really passionate about, and I was shocked that it didn't work, was our publisher channel. So we would partner with kind of major newspaper websites, and we would power their apartment search section. So San Francisco Chronicle, San Antonio Express News, Houston Chronicle, really big papers that had kind of decent sized audiences. And we said, well, let's power your apartment search section. We'll create this slick white label website. It's completely branded for you guys, and we'll drive a lot of traffic that way. And we did this also with a big apartments ratings and reviews site, one with 2 or 3 million monthly visitors. We figured, this is going to be huge. We're not going to need Google anymore. This is going to be the answer to our user acquisition initiatives. And none of them really worked out. Ended up being surprisingly a lot of headache, hassle, and technical debt, to be honest. It really just, all these white label sites made our code base much more complex than it needed to be. And it didn't drive a ton of traffic. And we ended up doing a rev share with these guys that ended up being financially less attractive to us than SEM once we kept getting better and better at SEM.
Yeah.
And display advertising is also a huge channel for us. Those ended up being more attractive financially and less headache and hassle.
Yeah.
And the picture channels ended up just being really low ROI. So we're phasing out all of that now.
Yeah. When you look back at, trying to figure out why it didn't work, can you put your finger on anything? Like maybe this was the reason that it didn't convert to more, users, even though you had this well-developed kind of thing. Anything you can put your finger on there of why it didn't work, maybe?
It's a great question. I've talked to folks in the resale real estate space, the job space, other classified listings categories about this. And had I had these conversations before then, I think I probably would have been better off. So you need, with a publisher, you need an absolute ton of traffic if you expect to get meaningful volume from them. Because even though you create like a white label site and you have it branded well, it's not exactly the frame of mind that their user base is in when they're on their website.
Okay.
So if you want to get enough users into your funnel, you need to start with a really big funnel at the top. And I've encountered a lot of cynicism from conversations with peers in these other classified listings categories that if they do a publisher deal, even with a Yahoo or an AOL or
Mm-hmm.
A really big partner like that, that they end up getting surprisingly low volume.
Yeah.
And because these are kind of brand name deals, they end up needing to pay a lot for that.
Yeah.
So you better make sure that you're getting a big PR branding benefit from it, because you're not going to really see the ROI from a user acquisition standpoint. And
Yeah.
that certainly proved itself out for us.
I'm so glad you brought that up. What I think about as you're talking is that not all funnels are created equal, and people don't realize this sometimes. I just had a friend of mine who teaches a course, and the course was being white labeled by TechCrunch, and he got like one sell off of it, like one or two sales or something just ridiculously low, and yet he thought this was going to be this juggernaut. But the fact is, the amount of traffic you got to have at the top of some funnels is so astronomical, it's not feasible. And then other funnels, you can convert the traffic so well that you can do with far less in the acquisition part of the funnel, but you convert it so much higher. And so it's really knowing your funnels, knowing the differences in the funnels, and really working the ones that work for you, and not just going after the big names because they may not work. So I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, and a story that comes to mind is that Yelp a few years ago launched a partnership with OpenTable, whereby you could just kind of book an appointment right there. And I just thought that was a marriage made in heaven, and then that was going to just drive so much revenue for Yelp. Where at the end of the day, the adoption for that has just been really, really low, and it's a pretty de minimis revenue line item for Yelp.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the only conclusion that I'm coming to, because Yelp has over 100 million monthly users at this point, is that that's just really not what someone's in the frame of mind of when they go to Yelp. Maybe they just want to read the review, or they just want to get the phone number, or maybe they're unfamiliar with OpenTable. So I was really surprised by that, but it just kind of goes to show.
Yeah, and you've mentioned that idea a couple times now, the frame of mind they're in. And I think about the strategies that have worked for you guys. So take the guides, the city guides. If you're looking at a city guide called How to Find an Apartment in Chicago, or whatever you guys call them, you're in the right frame of mind because that's what you're looking to do. So my guess is that's part of what's converting it so well. Did you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and it's the kind of the specificity of the searches that we see on our website. So oftentimes, we'll show up if somebody types in cheap apartments in Los Angeles. We'll show up pretty high for that. But oftentimes it's much more specific than that. They'll say, "I want a 2-bedroom apartment under $1,000 near the Galleria in Houston." And because the content on our city guides is so rich, we're talking about what's the area like near the Galleria? Can you really find something under $1,000? And those types of keywords find our city guides. And when someone has that level of specificity as to what they're looking for, they're ready to move. And that's a high level of intent. And those are the type of users that are attracted to our website and convert really well.
Yeah. So you've talked about some of the things that did work, SEM, SEO. Talked about some of the things that didn't work, these kind of white label partnership city guides on someone else's site. What's in the future, maybe? What are some things that you want to try? They might work, they might not work, who knows? But you're really considering, as soon as you get the resources, to kind of putting some things in that direction. Anything on the horizon?
Yeah, so on the consumer side, we've really underinvested historically in PR. We had our launch of the website. We got some good, tech and mainstream press that way. But we're making a big investment both internally, and we've hired an outside firm into PR over the next 12 months. Yeah. And we're sitting on just a mountain of rental data right now, and it's really underutilized. So in terms of kind of trends, storylines, we could really establish ourselves as the authority on the U.S. rental market, given all the data that we have. And there's just a ton of compelling content out there that a writer at the Chicago newspaper or kind of a reporter at the Kansas City kind of local news station would love to talk about. Rents are really on the rise in this new gentrified neighborhood within Kansas City. Yeah. Let's take these storylines that come out of the data and really package them nicely for the media. That can really get our name out there. Yeah. Because building our brand name and getting consumers to think of us first is really critical to us. Getting to where we need to be, which is, displacing Craigslist is the first thing people think about when they're searching for an apartment. So that's on the consumer side. More on the supply side, we have a self-service publishing tool that enables a kind of a small landlord or broker to post a listing onto our platform. And then we also, as an added benefit, we'll create a really pretty Craigslist posting for you if you still want to post to Craigslist.
Okay.
So this tool is really slick, but the adoption has been small, to date. So one thing that we've been launching over the last couple of weeks, and it's very much an experimentation phase, but the results have been really intriguing, is that every month we connect about 200,000 renters with landlords.
Wow.
And a lot of those landlords on our site are kind of unsponsored. They don't know us. Their listing got onto our site through some type of data partnership, and we're just connecting them with renters for free. And what we would typically do is just say, hey, here's Jim. He's looking for an apartment. He found it on Apartment List. Meet Jim, and that's it. We would walk away. Now we're saying, hey, we'd love to connect you with Jim. And oh, by the way, we have this great self-service publishing tool that'll enable you to put all your listings directly onto Apartment List and also cross-post them to Craigslist and really promote that.
Yeah.
And that we've found that on those emails, the open rates and the click-through rates are through the roof, relative to any other campaign that we've launched before. So we have really high hopes about that.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a great campaign, because if you're giving someone a lead and then after you give them the lead, you ask for something, it's so much better than just asking. You're not going to cold emails and saying, hey, sign up here and, publish your properties. You're saying, hey, here's Jim. He wants to rent something. Hey, why don't you publish your properties? So I think it's a good strategy. And when I think about what you said about the consumer side, I don't know if you're familiar with OkCupid, but they have a really similar strategy. They had all this data about dating, and they just put it into these really super interesting blog posts. And I've read some stats, and I don't remember off the top of my head, but such a large percentage of their eventual users and paying users found out, about them through the blog first. So I think you're right. When you have a huge data set, and it's something that's kind of interesting to consumers, like apartments or dating or something like that, I think it's a good strategy to really utilize that. You're shaking your head, so I'm assuming you know quite a bit about OkCupid.
No, a huge fan of their blog. And, some of the correlations they put together, are not suitable for Growth Hacker TV. But we put one together, and we just to prove this out, we've hacked together a few infographics, and one of the ones that we had a ton of fun with is that members of the audience that are from the Bay Area, they sympathize with the pain of rental rates, over the last year or two. So we actually we had this hypothesis that the growth in kind of venture capital and the tech sector was driving a lot of these rents in the Bay Area. So what we did is we plotted the growth of rental rates in the peninsula and San Francisco versus a lot of tech financings and IPOs over the last couple of years. We found that there's really strong positive correlation. And we had fun with it about all the things that you could buy with all that extra rent. But that was picked up by every media outlet under the sun. I think we were the trending story on LinkedIn for a few days. We had a lot of fun with that. So I think that's really the tip of the iceberg of things that we can do with data when we get creative.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. There's going to be so many infographics you guys can push out in the next year or two. It'll be fun to watch them. What are some tools that you use as you've grown Apartment List? Maybe tools, maybe apps, just things that are kind of in your repertoire that you just couldn't do without and you think other people should really think about using. Any go-to tools for you guys?
We on the project management side for development, we use Pivotal Tracker. So any kind of agile Ruby on Rails shop is probably accustomed to use that tool. That's been really good for getting us organized. We've tried a lot of tools for search engine marketing. There's a company called Marin Software, and there's another one called Clickable. That they're supposed to be these automated kind of bidding tools, and we've actually found that our in-house kind of home-brewed system, which is pretty low tech, to be honest with you. It's a lot of Excel, advanced Excel. It works much better for us than these kind of third-party tools have. We use a lot of Google Docs, nothing fancy, but coming from the Microsoft world, kind of having worked in enterprise and being an Outlook and a PC guy, I was slow to adopt to Google Docs, but now I use about 20 a day. So that's been really helpful for us. HipChat is something that our team uses to keep in touch, and we're getting a kick out of that as well.
Yeah, I'm considering HipChat because my inbox is filling up with internal emails, and so I'm thinking about trying to move some of that conversation over into HipChat. I just haven't done it yet, but I'm thinking about it. Yeah, and Google Docs, same here. I'm in Google Docs all day long. I mean, it's the heart of business in some senses, which is crazy. Has anything surprised you about the growth of Apartment List? Because I'm sure when you come in as the co-founder, you have preconceived notions, maybe what you hope it'll do, what you think it might do, how certain things will work out. As you look back, what surprised you about kind of the growth of Apartment List?
When we were thinking about getting into the rental space, into the apartment space, people would tell us, it's a really mature, crowded space. Folks have been at it since the mid '90s. How can you compete? And a lot of that is true. Craigslist's been around and dominant in this space since the mid to late '90s. And I guess it goes to show if you come into a new space with a lot of energy and a fresh take on things, that you'd be surprised what you can accomplish.
Yeah.
And particularly in spaces like it's almost an advantage that folks got started as early as that they did because they've become complacent. So you get to this situation where if you're a really kind of self-motivated, kind of nimble startup, that you can go in, make a dent in what would be, considered a really mature, crowded space.
Yeah, no, that's hopeful advice. It's hopeful to hear because so many markets do feel mature, but you're right. It's the innovator's dilemma. It's because they're mature that sometimes they're ripe for disruption. And you mentioned that you guys did things differently, and I want to come back to the UI because the UI of Apartment List, it feels very different. I mean, if you go through Craigslist to find an apartment and then you go to apartmentlist.com, it's like you've time warped into the future or something. How important is the UI? Is it just pretty or does it actually help your bottom line?
We think it's critical, and so we talked to hundreds of users before we went out designing. We didn't design it in a vacuum. And one thing that we found is that different users want different things, and a lot of them felt that location, map-based search was severely lacking, on Craigslist at the time, and since they've learned what we learned and rolled out map-based search. But we found the ability to toggle between kind of a photo kind of list view and a map view is really critical. Because if you live, let's say, in New York City, the difference between living in Murray Hill and living in Gramercy Park may be a really big deal to you, and that's down to the block level. If you live in Dallas, where I'm from, you're going to have a car. You don't mind kind of driving everywhere. Parking's pretty plentiful. You might be less kind of specific on where you want to live on a block by block basis. So maybe just a list of apartments within a 10-mile radius in Dallas is going to be better for you, and you can. You're a more visual based searcher, and you can look. You can search by photos as opposed to by location. So that's why we've had we have a toggle between a photo-based view and a map-based view, and we found that was really important.
Yeah.
Where it really manifests itself, this design and all of the kind of this big investment and dedication that we put into product, is in retention. Getting a user to the site for the first time, it can happen through PR or branding, but a lot of times it happens because they found our link on a natural or paid search result. But retention, not only in terms of their first visit, our user engagement statistics are really strong. Over 20 minutes average time on site, which is
that's huge. That's like Pinterest.
And then the return visit rate is really important. So the more that we can get users to come back to the site, because in an ideal world, they would find their perfect apartment in their first session, and then we'd never come back to Apartment List. We all know that that's not the reality. You check out some places online, you go visit them, some of them work out, some of them don't. You end up collaborating with a significant other, some potential roommates, maybe you extend your current place month to month, then you come back. So getting users to consistently come back is a core goal of ours, and our design and our product enable us to do that. We have a feature called My List, which is like, I guess, favorites on steroids. So searching for an apartment, maybe, let's say you start on your laptop on a Wednesday evening. You want to check out a few places on Saturday. So what you do is you save them to your list. And then on Saturday, our iOS mobile app, which is launching this week, they'll all be synced to your app. You can go, you can take some notes, you can remember, and then when you get back to your laptop later that night, you can kind of compare and contrast the three that you're down to.
Yeah.
So providing a really consistent experience throughout your apartment search is a core goal of ours. It gets users coming back to the site and really engaging with our brand.
Yeah, that sounds great. And you mentioned earlier how broken finding an apartment is. Do users tell you they actually enjoy being on your site? They actually enjoy the act of searching for an apartment because of the experience you've created for them?
Yeah, and that's one of the most gratifying parts of our job is we can say, wow, I've never come across a user experience. You got so many apartments, you make it really easy for me, and that's great. That said, we still get some negative feedback. We'll be like, this landlord didn't respond to me. Or I got to the place and it was nothing like the pictures looked. That place was a dump. And what that says to us is we're not just a discovery-based search engine. That's part of what we are today. But the process of finding an apartment, it's very hard for a consumer to isolate the website where they started searching from the actual experience that they had down the road, which kind of leads us to what we want to be when we grow up. There's pain all the way down the cycle, the renter life cycle. Corresponding with the landlord, we could do a lot more to make it easier for people to communicate back and forth, to schedule a showing. When it comes time to fill out an application, why are they filling out a paper application, which is a different one for every landlord, giving them a social security number, allowing them to run their credit? It's really primitive and it's a mess. So what we view as apartment lists today is really a beachhead, a stepping stone for us to provide tools for renters and landlords to make their life easier throughout the renter life cycle. Because we understand that the only way to make the process of finding an apartment and moving easier is to extend beyond just the discovery component, which is what we have today.
No, that's great. I've heard it said before that, founders and entrepreneurs, they're heat-seeking missiles, and they find the opportunities. And it's kind of like what you said. You have a beachhead, you have the data, you have the list, but there's opportunities that you're seeing heat at. It's like, okay, there's pain right next to this, and then when you get there, there's gonna be pain right next to that, all the way down. So you're kind of gonna eventually be a full stack apartment service. But right now you have a beachhead, and I think that's important because you can't do everything at once. It's just the resources don't exist to do everything right now. It's like you guys just said, you're releasing an iPhone app, but you've been around for a couple years now, right? And so, now's the time to release the iPhone app. It's another piece of the beachhead, and you're going to keep extending out. And I think, entrepreneurs, they have to focus and yet also balance the ability to find the opportunities right around the corner. And no one can tell you how fast to move or how slow to move, but you have to focus enough and take advantage of opportunities enough, or you'll fail if you do either too fast or too slow, right?
That's exactly right. One of our advisors says, you're going to see a lot of shiny nickels and dimes on the road, and the trick is you got to bypass those and pick up the silver dollars. My quip in return is, how do you know which ones are the silver dollars? And I think that's the age-old question, and that's why, that's what separates really successful entrepreneurs from ones that aren't as successful, is being able to make a bet and use your instincts to say, this is a really big problem and I should tackle it first.
Yeah.
12, 18 months ago, we were really tempted to break ground on an iOS app. We felt ourselves kind of falling behind. We saw the trends towards mobile, and we made the company decision that we could have the best user interface on web and mobile in the land, but if it didn't have a foundation of great data in the form of available apartments, then it was useless.
Yeah.
So we spent that time instead to focus on bringing on more data feeds, curating a lot more kind of profile pages of apartments on our website, so that when we do launch this mobile app this week, we'll have a great foundation of data on top of which the users can search on the go.
That is such great advice. I hope the people watching this or listening to this really understand what you just said and take it to heart, because that is such good advice. One of the things I've been doing with my team here is every week I ask them, what's the one thing you're doing? Because only one thing matters the most this week. So what is that one thing? And then ignore the other shiny objects. Like, where's the silver dollar? Like, where's the big one? I didn't use that phrase, but that's essentially what I'm saying. because there's three things we could do to move the needle, but one of them really moves it the most, and we each have our own one thing, and that's been my way of kind of communicating that idea to the team here, and it's been working because now we're starting to use that language internally, like, all right, this is good, but it's not my one thing. It's somewhere else on the list, and then they move on with their one thing, and it's been working. We've seen things move in the right direction. So let's change gears a little bit. Apartment List is doing awesome. You're doing great things there, but you're also an investor and advisor to quite a few other startups. I looked on Angel List, and if my count is correct, there's 13 or so other startups that you have your hand in some way. So let me ask you about kind of the advice you give them, because you have your co-founder hat on working with Apartment List, but then you have your advisor hat on working with these other groups. What strategic advice do you find yourself giving to startups kind of over and over about growth? What do you just feel yourself being a broken record about? And it might be something we've already talked about. So,
yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, some of the things that we've talked about in the last few minutes, which is focus. You can't do everything at once. So a lot of times your growth strategy or user acquisition strategy has, 8 bullet points on it. I want to do the SEO thing, I want to do the SEM thing, and then I want to do kind of PR, I want to do word of mouth, I want to do, the social graph. So what you need to do is decide what you're best positioned to do today and go out and execute on that. And you have a near-term execution strategy, and a medium-term, and a long-term. If the near-term doesn't work out, maybe you don't want to do the medium or the long-term. You want to scrap that and move on to the next one. Because the best thing that we have as startups is speed and our ability to move quickly. Big companies do not have that. The faster that you can focus on one thing at a time and prove or disprove that strategy really quickly, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. What misconceptions do you find that founders come to you with? They think they know about growth even though they've never experienced it before, and they come to you with this wrong-headed thinking about how it's actually going to play out. Any misconceptions you see kind of over and over?
Yeah, typically, I think PR and brand is overemphasized from the outset. Too many founders, particularly in this part of the country, will say, we're not going to worry about acquiring users. We're just going to build a great product and they'll come. And that sounds very romantic, but there's a lot of people building great products out there. And I think, it's becoming, more apparent to the entrepreneurial community out here that traditionally people have focused way too much on perfection in the product and not enough on growth and distribution. But I think despite all the smart people like Paul Graham saying these things, people continue it's natural for people spending all day building a product to take great pride in it and assume that others are going to see all the great qualities in that product. Not take a step back and say these are human beings that don't necessarily care what you're working on. They care, is it going to make my life easier? Is it going to make me more money?
Yeah.
Or what have you. So focusing on, on growth, focusing on monetization, and less on the perfection of the product is advice that I typically provide in reaction to what I see as an overemphasis on the product, frankly.
Yeah. And earlier on, when we first started talking, you mentioned that you guys have a revenue model at the beginning. And I think you have a point of pride there. Like, yes, we're making money at the beginning. Because think about it, money is the best way to validate a product. Because you can assume, like you said, that people are going to love your product. But until they have to pay you for it, you don't know anything. But the second someone has to pay for what it is you're providing, then you've created a real exchange of value, which is the heart of any business model. And so I think you're right, getting to distribution, getting to the users, and not just being overly obsessed with the product, but that you're saying that from someone with a great product. So it's not that you're devaluing product, it's just that distribution really matters. So I think that's great advice. When you think about growth, do you recommend there be one person in a startup that's kind of the sole individual obsessed with growth, or do you think it's really a team effort that everyone needs to play a role in growth, to varying degrees? How do you kind of view that?
No, I do think it should be a team. I mean, ultimately, if growth is a big initiative for the company, the leadership, the co-founders, the CEO should be kind of waking up every morning, kind of thinking about that.
Hmm.
I think so. I'll find the article if I can and share it with you. But
Yeah.
I think Reid Hoffman said there's three things as a consumer web company that you need to think about. It's growth, it's monetization, and it's engagement. And if you try to focus on all three of those at the same time, you're probably going to fail.
Hmm.
So you should focus on kind of one or at the most two of them at the same time.
Hmm.
And you should create a team that wakes up every morning thinking, how am I going to get more users? Or how am I going to get the users to come back to the site more times? How am I going to improve that DAU over MAU?
Hmm.
So it's creating those task forces with, like you said, kind of a single KPI that they're optimizing for. So there's no ambiguity about what I should be working on right now. It's crystal clear. And I think ultimately growth is a team effort. But if growth, this quarter is a key initiative for us, you better believe I'm going to be waking up in the morning thinking about it. And if we're not growing, I'm to blame.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I expect that kind of answer the way that you do it all yourself before passing it on, like we talked about earlier. So I would expect that you're also thinking about growth a lot. Now, you mentioned KPI there, kind of having that one goal that everyone's aware of. And then you also mentioned, DAU over MAU, kind of learning of your monthly visitors, how many of them are active daily. Is that your guys' main KPI right now, or is there something else that you're kind of really focused on?
No, we're more focused on growth and monetization today.
Yeah.
Retention is something that we look at, but I wouldn't say it's our core KPI.
Yeah.
So I would say kind of monthly users and revenue per user.
Hmm.
And then the other big one I'd throw in there, because we have a big supply effort right now, is how many active rental listings do we have on our site at any given time? And growing our share of the overall number of available rental listings on the web is huge to our value proposition in growing.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, Chris, this has been an incredible interview. You've given us so much great advice, and you really kind of peeled back the layers and showed us what apartment list did that work, did that didn't work, what you're going to try next. So I really thank you for your transparency there. I have one last question for you. It might be something you've already talked about, and maybe something different, but what's the best advice that you have for anyone that's trying to grow a startup? It can be as specific or as vague as you want.
So I'd say, and this is going back to some of the comments that we've had earlier, is that I would not focus on building the perfect innovative solution, but I would get into a market that you think is big, that you think you can break into by out executing the incumbents, and can innovate from around that. And the reason I say that is because startups very often, the perception at least, is that, hey, there's a 1 in 10 chance this is going to work out, but if it works out, we're all going to be filthy rich. Startups don't need to be that way. You can get into an industry, out-execute everyone, create like a space, like a competitive foothold in that industry, and roll out innovation from within. Because I'll tell you what, it's a heck of a lot easier to innovate in a smart way if you're already in an industry talking to kind of customers and users every day than it is to innovate from a vacuum, from a whiteboard, ivory tower. So I would say kind of roll up your sleeves, get into the industry, work on creating a sustainable business model so that you're not, beholden to investors, that next round of venture capital, and figure out exactly what that industry needs before going out and executing on it. Don't keep your head down for 6 months coming up with a theoretical solution when you're not really sure if it's going to work in practice.
That's great advice. Chris, again, thank you so much for coming on Growth Hacker TV.
Hey, it was my pleasure. Thanks so much for taking the time, Bronson.